Theater program director at Vincennes University, but women's suffrage is of great interest to me because it was closely tied to what I did my master's thesis on, which actually is in history. A lot of the women who helped to fight for African American freedom in the 19th century were also interested in freedom for women. And so tattooed on my arm is a quote from one of the women who were a part of the Henry County Female Anti-Slavery Society. And it says, though we are deprived of the privilege of suffrage. And that is something that they continue to push even when they were fighting for other people, because it was so near and dear to their heart. So we're going to read some primary sources from the mid-19th century up through when the actual law was ratified in 1920. We're going to start with kind of the era that most people think about when they think about women's suffrage starting. Although the first recorded incident of women voting in the United States that I could find was in the mid-18th century, when a woman who actually was a widow and owned her own property was allowed to vote in town elections. This was in Massachusetts. It's the only time in Massachusetts that they could find where this happened. And there were also a time in the 19th century where there were some situations in Kentucky where both men and women were allowed to vote. But actually, not 19th century, 18th century. But then in the 19th century, most of those laws had been revoked, unfortunately. So, this is from the Women's Rights Convention. It was attended by both men and women. And this was part of the Declaration of Sentiments that was written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was and remained active in the women's suffrage movement throughout her life. And both John, I didn't introduce John Cardinal, he is one of my theater students, and we're both going to read it because it was signed by both men and women. So we're going to read part of the beginning of this Declaration of Sentiments. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one portion of the family of man to assume among the people of the earth a position different from that of which they have hitherto occupied, but one to which the laws of nature and of nature's gods entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes that impel them to such a course. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So, it wasn't easy to maintain women's rights organizations, and there were many, so they kind of had separate ones. They came together. The Civil War happened, which became a focus that divided a lot of people. The focus on trying to get African American men the right to vote became another focus during the later part of the 19th century, and which a lot of women did help to have that happen, which did happen in the 1870s. And so then after that, it kind kind of return to that idea of women attempting to get suffrage for themselves. And so at one of the national meetings, this was part of a speech that was given by Susan B. Anthony, who is also another name you might know, and she was very active in suffrage and also women's rights. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having the lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution. The preamble of the federal Constitution says, "We, the people of the United States." It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union. And we formed it, not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. And it is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment, of the blessings of liberty, while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government, the ballot. So, for the rest of the 19th century and into the early 20th century, we had several different groups of women attempting to get suffrage, men also at their side. One of those people who was actively involved in trying to get women's suffrage was Frederick Douglass. And yet it still was always an issue that was pushed to the side. Part of that reason was because you had women like Carrie Chapman Catt who wanted to use more traditional methods of attempting to get the vote versus some of the younger women who came into play in the 20th century. And so now we kind of jump to the 1910s, where you get more of what we think of the activism that seemed to lead to what ended in women actually gaining their suffrage. The types of information that were being shared in the 20th century were amazing. Organizations were great at giving different documents and sharing them with other organizations. So we have one we want to share. It's called Votes for Women, and it's labeled the Women's Franchise League of Indiana. It might be one that was shared with another organization more likely. So there's two sides. One that says, people say, which is more than likely, anti-suffrage, women's suffrage people say. And then the other one that says, we say. So we're going to read this together.
People say the majority of women don't want to vote.
We say the majority never wants progress.
People say women will not vote when they're given the right.
We say official figures show women do vote largely whenever they have the right.
People say if women vote, they ought to fight to do police duty.
We say men who could not fight still vote. This is the age when right makes might.
People say if women vote, they must hold office.
We say a woman will have to be elected to office by men and women together. Do the men all have to hold office?
People say women have enough to do without voting.
We say voting takes but a few minutes and can be done on the way to the market.
People say it would interfere with a woman's business, the care of the house.
We say, does it interfere with a man's business in factory, store, or office?
People say it will double the ignorant vote.
We say 1 to 3 more girls than boys attend the high schools, and women will soon be the more educated class.
People say it will double the foreign vote.
We say there are in the United States over 12 times as many native-born women as foreign-born.
People say it will double the criminal vote.
We say only 1 in 20 of the criminals are women. It would add largely to the good vote and very slightly to the bad vote.
People say it will double the expense and trouble of the election.
We say the safety of a democracy lies in giving a vote to all classes so that all are fairly represented and the result will be a fair, average opinion. Ought we to cut the present vote in half to save money?
People say women can change or make laws by indirect influence.
We say, why be indirect when we can be direct? Why waste time and strength in beating around the bush?
People say a woman's place is in the home.
We say, she leaves it to go to the market, and why not vote? It takes less time.
People say women are represented by men.
We say, would men let women represent them at the polls? Does a man with women to represent have more than one vote? Or does he cast his vote according to the majority vote of those he represents? No, then he doesn't represent them. Is a man's vote given him to represent someone else's vote or his own? So they talk a little bit in that about states where women have the rights to vote. And so we want to share with you a little bit about states that did give women the right to vote at the time. So John's going to share with you some of the states that as of 1915 had given women full suffrage, that means local, state, and national voting privileges in 1915.
In 1869, Wyoming. In 1893, Colorado. In 1896, Idaho. In 1896, Utah. In 1910, Washington. In 1911, California. In 1912, Kansas. In 1912, Oregon. In 1912, Alaska. Or 1913, Alaska. 1914, Nevada. In 1914, Montana. In 1913, Illinois.
So here are some of the states that by 1915 did not have a vote. So we have Maine, we have Texas, which that kind of makes sense because Texas has always considered itself its own entity. But we also have some unexpected ones, like Indiana, Pennsylvania, and most of the states south of Pennsylvania had not given the vote. Michigan had not given the vote yet. Missouri and Arkansas. So there were quite a few in the eastern part of the country that had still not given women any part of suffrage yet. So it's really interesting that it was kind of divided up as to where women had any kind of suffrage at all. So that I think becomes more and more complicated as we go through this process of giving, of thinking about giving the right to vote to women, because there's no equity, especially in the eastern half of the state, as to what voting meant to women in general. So you can see why there was some trouble. So during this time, there were quite a few women who were working towards suffrage. They eventually merged into one organization, and they tried to work towards more revolutionary tactics And Alice Paul was one of those people. The younger group, the younger women in the suffrage movement, wanted to make bold strokes in their actions, and so they went and spoke with the Senate. They went and spoke with congressional groups. They went and spoke with organizations for not decades, but from like 1912, 1913, 1914, 1915, 1916, and they weren't getting anywhere. They spoke with the president multiple times, and it was just not going anywhere. So they decided to protest outside of the White House. And women came from all over the country to participate. And so it became pretty dynamic, but it also became fairly problematic for the president because it didn't look very good. And so eventually they decided to arrest these women, and they put them in jail, and the women decided, well, we can still protest while we're in jail. So they went on a hunger strike. And during this hunger strike, some of the women were not treated very well. But the news that came out of the course, because it was coming from the jail administration, was, oh, everything's fine. And so we want to tell you a little bit about that story that's been gleaned from some of the news that was coming out at the time, but also some of the letters and information that finally came out from the time. And so we'll both be reading parts of this. So part of this is from documents that Alice Paul shared. Part of it is from other documents too. So, Alice Paul is in her 19th day of serving sentences totaling 7 months imposed on her for peacefully picketing along the White House fence in favor of women's suffrage and against President Wilson's lack of support for our cause.
It had been learned that she was force-fed through a rubber tube 3 times in just 12 hours after authorities ended her 78-hour hunger strike yesterday. And she is currently under observation and being threatened with being declared insane and confined indefinitely in an asylum if she doesn't renounce the militant tactic of picketing for the right to vote and end her attempts to get all the prison suffragists political prisoner status.
Prison officials have been doing everything they can to make Paul as uncomfortable as possible. When she requested privacy, her door was removed. When she asked to have one of her windows opened, it was nailed shut. Her warm coat was confiscated. And if you think about it at the time, most prisons were like stone walls, and the windows probably didn't really have, if they had glass, it probably wasn't sealed very well. She had a sleepless night due to the constant shrieks of the patients in the psych ward.
There were no force feedings, Dr. Bain said. The women took the food without resistance and merely want to advertise themselves by saying they have been fed forcibly. Miss Paul's condition is not critical. It is not even serious. She is doing well. Superintendent Zinka admitted that the feedings were forced on the women, but claimed that they took it like little lambs.
But the truth about the suffrage prisoners are enduring still got out. It's a lie, Paul declared. I have resisted to the limit of my strength. Alva Belmont, leader of the National Women's Party, New York branch, sent a telegram to President Wilson today protesting the barbarous and inhumane treatment of Alice Paul and Rose Winslow and their comrades, now unjustly and illegally detained in the Washington jail. She held the Wilson administration responsible for what was happening to the suffrage prisoners and said, persecution by the administration is causing dangerous and popular revolt against the abandonment of democratic ideals to which you have pledged our nation.
The struggle will go on, both in and out of prison. The National Women's Party will continue to pick as the president until he lives up to his own frequently expressed ideals of worldwide democracy by endorsing the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, then lobbying his fellow Democrats who control Congress to pass it. After passage by 2/3 of both House and Senate and ratification by 3/4 of the state legislators, it will bring democracy to millions of women in Wilson's own country by permanently and explicitly outlawing sex bias at all polling places nationwide.
So, needless to say, the president kind of turned on his heels and moved towards encouraging the Senate and Congress to try to get a bill ratified. What was interesting about once it was passed in the Senate and Congress and then moved to the states to be ratified, Tennessee was the last state that would make enough of the 3/4 majority. And it was interesting because of the men voting, one of them, his mother, had sent him a letter. And recently, there's a musical called Suffrage by Shana Tao, and she took parts of letters that Harry, oh my gosh, now I just looked it up, Harry Bain, sorry about that, I'm terrible with names. His mother wrote and put it together as part of a song, and we're going to read the lyrics of that song together. Dear Harry, I've never sent a telegram before. I drove all the way to town in a downpour, so I sure hope this reaches you in time for your vote today. I'm real proud that you hold office. And son, there's something I must say.
Your father gave his life in the Great War 3 years ago. I'll know I'll be kicked out of Buchanan County for saying so. I hate this president for making him go, and I wish I had the right to vote him out. Now I know I'm just an old farmer, milking cows in Tennessee. But I read the paper, and I've seen the women marching to be free. They made me think that maybe I could hop a train to Washington, D.C. and march too. Only I was home raising you, so I did my best to teach you what I knew. Now, your own little girl is nearly 3. What do you want her future to be? Will you vote for her, my son? Let your mama know she raised a good one. And oh, I made that meatloaf you like, so come on home when you're done. Burn.
Burn.
Burn
For Christ's sake, burn. We did it with lots of love, Mama. And yes, he voted yes. And so, after that day, A.H. Roberts, the governor of the state of Tennessee, sent the following document to the President of the United States. I, A.H. Roberts, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the governor of the state of Tennessee, and also do certify to the President of the United States that the attached paper is a true and perfect copy of Senate Joint Resolution Number 1, ratifying an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, declaring that the rights of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex, and that the Congress shall have power to enforce said article by appropriate legislation as set out in said resolution, and that the same was passed and adopted by the first extra session of the 61st General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, constitutionally called and met and convened in the Capitol in the city of Nashville on August 9th, 1920, thereby ratifying said proposed 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.